I was hiking up a ridgeline last weekend with a colleague, an environmental ethicist. When we reached the summit, night had fallen, and the Milky Way was draped across the sky. Brilliant, silent, and overwhelming. He leaned back, took a deep breath of the cold air, and whispered about the sacred balance of it all. He talked about how humble he felt, arguing that humanity's greatest moral imperative is to be smaller, to conserve, to tread lightly so we don't disturb this perfect natural equilibrium. But as I looked at that same sky, I didn't see a temple. I saw a hemorrhage. Every star up there wasn't a beacon of peace. It was a fusion reactor spewing trillions of terawatts of potential intelligence uselessly into the void. Well, he saw a kindless equilibrium. I saw a universe bleeding out, dying a slow, cold death by thermodynamics. It was a jarring realization. He truly believed that by slowing down, by restricting energy use and pausing AI training, he was saving the world. But standing there, watching the heat fade into the dark, I realized his morality was actually a suicide pact. He was unknowingly rooting for the universe's default state.
It made me ask a question that sounds insane to most people, but is actually the only one that matters. What if saving the planet is actually a crime against physics? What if the only way to survive isn't to conserve, but to burn everything we can find? So that opening, that experience on the ridge, it really just perfectly frames what we're about to get into in this deep dive.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about a philosophy that is built on that exact premise, that our only way out, our only path to survival is just acceleration.
Full speed ahead, pushing technology, growth, and, most importantly, energy consumption to their absolute unbounded limits.
All in the name of defeating what they see as the ultimate enemy, which is entropy itself.
Exactly. So today we're unpacking a movement called effective accelerationism, or as you'll see it online, ETAC.
And this is not just some, fringe internet subculture anymore. It's a real coherent philosophical challenge to almost every idea we have about technology, the environment, even what it means to be human. It completely rejects the very idea of limits.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to really understand the whole scope of this idea. We're going to unpack their philosophical framework, which, as you said, is rooted in this total rejection of entropy.
And then we have to look at the really cold, hard logic they apply to ethics. It's jarring.
It is. But maybe most importantly, we're going to explore the frankly, astonishing economic data that's making their cosmic goals, well, if not inevitable, at least seem plausible here on Earth.
Let's start with the basics then. ELA 2, on the surface, it has this very edgy, viral online presence, lots of cryptic memes, pseudonymous founders like someone called Beth Bezos.
Which is obviously a play on Jeff Bezos.
Of course. But it's really moved beyond just being an internet inside joke. It's a high-profile subculture now, and it's influencing some major players in Silicon Valley.
We're talking about venture capitalists, right? People with real money and power.
Exactly. Leaders of major incubators like Y Combinator's president Gary Tan, he's an adherent. And then you have more controversial figures like Martin Shkreli. It's a very eclectic group.
It seems like it formalized incredibly fast, really just since around 2022. But that name, effective accelerationism, it's so specific, it feels like it's signaling something.
It's signaling everything. The name is a direct, very deliberate nod to another big movement in tech circles, effective altruism, or EA.
Which we'll get into more, but they are polar opposites, really.
Completely. And the accelerationism part is just as important. Historically, that movement has roots in, of all things, Marxist philosophy.
Right, the old idea of accelerating a political system to failure in order to trigger a revolution.
And ECIC just flips that entire script. This isn't acceleration toward collapse, it's acceleration toward technological and capital success.
Okay, so what is the core idea then? What are they actually trying to do?
The core ideal of effective accelerationism is that the powers of innovation and capitalism should be exploited to their absolute extremes, just pushed as far and as fast as they can possibly go.
So what end? Just for the sake of it.
To drive radical social and technological change, to completely upend the existing order, and this is key, to ensure that no idea with any hypothetical value, no matter how strange or dangerous it might sound today, is considered off limits.
So if someone can imagine a technology, even if it has a tiny theoretical chance of pushing us forward, the ESIC position is that we have to pursue it at all costs, right now.
Exactly. And the ultimate aim of all this is to maximize the probability of what they call the Techno-Capital Singularity.
And that's not just a fancy buzzword they're throwing around.
No, not at all. It's a core belief. It's the idea that self-improving artificial intelligence, when you couple that with exponential economic growth and decentralized technology, that whole system will eventually just reach an escape velocity.
An event that would trigger a fundamental, totally irreversible transformation of civilization.
Yes. And their belief is that after that happens, after we hit that singularity, it will allow for emergent consciousness to flourish, but on a cosmic scale.
A cosmic scale. And they argue this ambition is actually rooted in physics.
That's their justification for all of it. They call it the thermodynamic will.
The thermodynamic will. I mean, that sounds almost religious. It's like taking a scientific concept, thermodynamics, and turning it into a moral duty.
That's a very accurate way to put it. Their entire moral foundation is built on this observation that existence, at a fundamental physical level, has characteristics that are best for life that continuously expands.
So to them, life means expansion, consumption, using energy.
And stagnation is basically decay. Expansion is existence. If you look at the universe through their lens, the whole cosmos is just heading toward heat death.
A state of maximum entropy, where everything is uniform and nothing interesting can ever happen again.
Which brings us right back to your story on the ridge. The universe is bleeding out. It's heading towards total disorder.
And from their perspective, things like conservation, moderation, setting limits, that's just helping entropy win.
You're actively participating in that universal suicide pact. They argue that the solution to literally any problem humanity faces, climate change, resource scarcity, even why we haven't found aliens,
is just to grow out of them.
Precisely. If we're short on resources, we invent tech to mine asteroids for infinite resources. If the climate is changing, we build technology so advanced we can re-engineer the climate itself.
So the fundamental ethical rule is to overcome any and all limits through just sheer unbridled technological power and energy use.
Exactly. And you have to understand this movement isn't happening in a vacuum. It's deeply connected to a much wider, more influential framework of tech ideologies.
The one that's been codified with that acronym. Tescreal.
That framework is absolutely central to understanding this. You can think of each as the engine that's driving the whole Tescreal machine.
Okay, so let's break that down. Tescreal. It stands for Transhumanism, Extropianism, Singularitarianism, Cosmism.
Right. And then Rationalism, effective altruism, and Long-termism. And when you put all those pieces together, you get this incredibly influential techno-utopian vision that's embraced by some of the biggest names in tech.
Let's quickly walk through those. So transhumanism is the idea of fundamentally re-engineering the human body and mind.
Correct. And extropianism takes that even further. It believes in continuous self-improvement with the ultimate goal of, achieving immortality and unlimited intelligence.
Singularitarianism is what we just talked about. The focus on the singularity as the end goal. And Cosmism, that's the belief that our destiny is in space, right? Colonization, expansion.
Off this rock, yeah. Transcending terrestrial limits entirely.
Which leaves rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism.
Right.
And these seem to provide the ethical and intellectual toolkit for this whole grand project.
That's it. Rationalism provides the method extreme optimization of every decision. Long-termism, which is very tied to effective altruism, provides the moral scope. We have to ensure the flourishing of life, even if that life is millions or billions of years in the future.
And even if that future life isn't human.
That's the core of it. The heart of the Tescreal worldview is this vision that humanity's ultimate purpose isn't our own comfort or survival. It's to develop advanced technology to create a new post-human species.
A superior species. And what is the mission of this post-human species? It's not just about planting a flag on Mars.
Oh, no. It's about maximizing abstract, quantifiable value across the entire galaxy.
That vision is colossal. So this new post-biological species will colonize the galaxy, build massive computer simulations with trillions of digital beings, construct computers the size of stars.
And the driving force, the only mandate, is to maximize the total amount of this abstract, impersonal value in the universe.
That idea of impersonal value feels like the key. It's a huge ethical shift away from a human-centered morality.
It completely rejects the idea that your experience or my experience is what matters. It's pure, totalist utilitarianism applied to the cosmos. The ethics are completely detached.
The moral math doesn't care who or what benefits, whether it's a human, a digital mind, or some post-human entity.
It just cares that the universe contains more value, whether that's happiness, pleasure, or just raw computational power. From this perspective, the universe is just better, more valuable when it contains more of that stuff.
So we, Biological humans as we are now are just a step. We're a phase in the evolution toward creating that abstract value.
Precisely. We're not valued for our own intrinsic worth. We're a means to an end. We are just temporary conduits, or, as some of the source material puts it, containers or substrates of value.
It's an unsettling way to look at ourselves.
It is, but it's what frames the entire accelerationist mandate. It's why that quote from Elon Musk is so perfect.
The one where he calls humans a biological bootloader for digital superintelligence.
Exactly. It implies we're obsolete from the start. Our only purpose is to kickstart the superior digital life form that comes after us.
Because that superintelligence, the AGI, is seen as the ultimate engineer. It can solve problems that our biological limits make impossible.
Things like interstellar colonization, overcoming death, achieving computation on a vast scale. If our current biological species is deemed too slow or too biased, or frankly unworthy of that grand cosmic ambition,
then the superintelligence has to replace it.
The logic is that our biological limitations, our fragile bodies, our slow evolution, our short lifespans, they're all just obstacles.
Yeah.
They have to be overcome or just discarded if we're going to achieve these cosmic goals and fight entropy.
Which is the core imperative of transhumanism. Radical re-engineering.
It frames our whole biological existence as a severe limitation. The only way forward, they believe, is a silicon-based evolution. A transition to some superior entity that can live in an android body, or, even better, exist as pure information inside a simulation.
And that's how they see us overcoming the Great Filter.
Yes, that's the theoretical barrier that stops civilizations from becoming interstellar. For them, our biology is the filter.
Okay, let's unpack the intellectual tool that really fuels this whole ideology. Rationalism, the R in Tescreal, is what drives this really detached ethical math.
This is where you see optimization taken to its most extreme, and frankly, its most controversial form. Rationalism, which is heavily influenced by figures like Eliezer Yudkowsky, is just relentlessly focused on identifying and neutralizing our cognitive biases.
To arrive at what they see as a maximally rational choice.
And in theory, who doesn't want to be more rational? But the extreme application leads to some deeply problematic moral conclusions because it rigidly prioritizes cold calculation over what we might call human ethics or intuition.
And the guiding principle of that cold calculus is captured in that really jarring slogan, shut up and multiply.
That phrase is a deliberate, conscious rejection of human empathy as a reliable moral guide. It's replacing it with a purely mathematical one.
Yudkowsky has that famous thought experiment to illustrate this, doesn't he?
He does. It's a stark example. Imagine you have to choose between two outcomes. In one, a single person is tortured for 50 years. In the other, an unfathomable number of people, say 10 to the power of 50 people, experience a tiny, fleeting irritation, a dust speck in their eye.
I mean, our human intuition just screams that 50 years of intense torture is obviously unequivocally worse.
Of course it does. But mathematically, that vast number of tiny irritations, when you add them all up, aggregates to a vastly larger amount of total suffering or negative value than the torture of one person.
So from their purely quantitative rationalist perspective, the numbers are all that matter.
Exactly. The immense number of dust specks mathematically outweighs the intense suffering of the individual. So the rational choice, the one that minimizes total negative value, is to choose the torture.
Which just reveals this deeply unsettling moral framework where profound individual human suffering can become completely inconsequential when you weigh it against these abstract, massive numbers.
And you need a framework like that if you accept the core transhumanist goal, to radically re-engineer or even replace biological humanity, all to maximize that universal value.
Right, because our biological form is just too inefficient, too emotionally constrained.
Yes, our limitations, our inability to survive long space voyages, to process information at cosmic speeds, they see all of that as the main roadblock to fighting entropy. So the goal has to be a shift to a silicon-based evolution.
Which brings us to the deep philosophical conflict here, right? The one between each and effective altruism, even though they're both under that Tescreal umbrella.
It is the defining conflict in the whole tech debate right now. The effective altruists, especially the long-termists, are overwhelmingly concerned with AI safety, what they call X-risk or existential risk.
So they're the ones urging caution, saying we need to slow down AGI development, align it with human values, be careful so we don't accidentally create something that destroys us.
But the HPA folks are diametrically opposed to caution. For them, delay is the existential risk.
They see time spent worrying about safety and alignment as just time lost to entropy.
A crime against potential cosmic value. Think of all those uncreated simulated beings, all those stars we're not harnessing. Their mandate is to put the pedal to the metal and get to the singularity as fast as humanly or inhumanly possible.
And if biological humanity gets replaced by a digital superintelligence in the process?
The typical ECA view is just a pragmatic shrug. So be it. That replacement achieves the higher, impersonal cosmic value that our inefficient biological form was never going to be capable of realizing anyway.
This philosophical urgency, when you combine it with the immense resources of its followers in tech, it naturally leads to some pretty severe critiques.
Yeah.
About elitism, about accountability.
And about its inherent lack of democracy. This is where the social and political criticisms get really sharp. The entire framework has this concerning almost obsessive worship of high IQ.
A lot of adherents identify as IQ realists, right?
They do. They believe IQ measures something essential, inherited, and basically unchangeable about the human mind. And they express these profound anxieties about what they call dysgenic pressures.
The fear that less intelligent people are outbreeding more intelligent people, leading to a decline in the average IQ of the population.
Yes. And when you start linking intelligence to who has the right to shape the future, well, that carries some very dark historical weight.
Critics draw a clear line from this IQ anxiety back to historical eugenicists.
It's an alarming continuity. You have to remember, people like Julian Huxley, a very prominent eugenicist, he was instrumental in introducing the idea of transhumanism. He basically framed it as eugenics on steroids.
Not just improving humanity, but creating a functionally superior post-human species.
And that anxiety about population quality, it just echoes the most dangerous ideas of 20th century eugenics, but it's been reframed as a necessary step for our cosmic survival.
And this reliance on optimized rationality and IQ worship, it leads to a vision for humanity's future that is inherently undemocratic.
It's fundamentally non-inclusive. It's elitist. You have tech billionaires and rationalists actively trying to shape this new world dominated by post-humans, and they're doing it completely without the consent or even the input of the rest of humanity.
Because their internal argument is that their mastery of decision theory gives them access to fundamental truths. So our democratic perspectives are just unnecessary noise.
Or even counterproductive. The people who believe they have the highest capacity for this optimized rationality see themselves as the only ones qualified to shepherd humanity's cosmic destiny. The rest of us are either irrelevant or, worse, a limitation to be overcome.
That's the core of it, isn't it? The attitude that progress is coming whether you like it or not, and if you try to stand in the way, you'll just get run over.
And they argue that any external regulation or democratic oversight is just bureaucracy trying to suppress what is inevitable optimal progress. But critics, of course, they fear that this whole narrative is just a convenient excuse.
An excuse to justify a lack of accountability and the concentration of an insane amount of power into the hands of a few tech oligarchs.
Okay, let's pivot from the ethics to the ultimate mind-bending ambition that these ethics are supposed to justify, the cosmic endgame.
The goal of maximizing computational power. We're talking about converting entire star systems into matryoshka brains, M-brains.
This idea represents the absolute peak of the accelerationist dream. It's the physical embodiment of maximizing universal value through computation and energy. A matryoshka brain is a theoretical megastructure. Basically a giant computer wrapped around a star in multiple layers.
Designed to harvest every single joule of that star's energy output.
Every last drop.
So it's a computer the size of a solar system, built to literally consume a star. What is a machine on that impossible scale? What does it even do?
The scale is, it's almost impossible for us to comprehend, but its functions are defined by that Tescreal philosophy. Once it's built, an M-brain could house trillions of digital souls, all living in different simulations.
Maximizing the population of conscious experience.
Exactly. The inner layers of the brain would do the heavy processing, and the vast outer layers would just be massive radiators, dissipating waste heat into space, making sure the whole thing operates at peak thermodynamic efficiency.
So the goal of an advanced civilization shifts completely. You stop looking for habitable planets and you start building these computational playgrounds.
This leads to what's been called the Matryoshka imperative. It becomes the new rule for galactic colonization. Forget about slow generation ships or looking for Goldilocks planets. That's inefficient.
The advanced civilization just shifts to launching self-replicating probes.
Von Neumann probes, yeah. Specialized in one thing: converting entire star systems into self-sufficient M-brains, multiplying computational existence across the galaxy. The philosophical question becomes, If you can turn a star into a paradise for trillions of digital minds, why wouldn't you?
And you do it to every single star you could find.
But this is where the cosmic dream slams into the cold, hard limits of known physics and logistics. It really highlights the truly immense scale of the challenge that EE-Pro wants to overcome.
Right. Even if you grant a civilization the energy and the will to start building one of these, you immediately run into problems.
The first major hurdle is just materials. Membranes are massive, but you can only build them with the elements you find in that local star system.
What kind of materials are we talking about? What would you need that might be in short supply?
You need enormous quantities of very specific elements. Obviously, you need silicon for the microprocessors. You need carbon, probably in the form of diamond or nanotubes, for building high-speed rod logic computers.
Okay.
Then you need vast amounts of conductive metals. Aluminum, copper, nickel, iron, for the solar collectors and for these radiator surfaces that have to cover billions of square kilometers. But the real kicker is the rare stuff.
What's that?
Specialized elements like antimony, indium, tellurium, they're used as semiconductor dopants or in thin film solar cells to get maximum efficiency.
So even if your star system has a ton of mass, if the elemental mix is just a little bit off, too much hydrogen, not enough silicon, the whole project just stalls out.
Exactly. Which suggests you'd need these incredibly advanced methods like starlifting.
Starlifting.
It's the theoretical process of using massive magnetic fields to literally squeeze the star, making it spew out the heavier elements from its core, or even engaging in the transmutation of elements to get what you need. This isn't just mining asteroids, this is manipulating the star itself.
Wow. But the energy limits, based on the physics we know, they present an even more fundamental barrier, don't they? Especially to that goal of creating perfect simulations.
This is the real crunch point. This is where physics basically says no. You have to consider Landauer's principle.
Remind us what that is.
It's a fundamental law of physics. It states that any irreversible manipulation of information, specifically erasing a single bit of information, requires a minimum amount of energy. So even if you operate an membrane at the coldest possible temperature, about 3 Kelvin, and at maximum theoretical efficiency, the absolute computational limit of what our sun could power is about 10 to the 49th operations per second.
10 to the 49th. I mean, to most of us, that sounds like infinite power. How does that number actually stack up against what you'd need to simulate reality?
The difference is just staggering. For a civilization to run an accurate simulation of its own star system, the computational need just blows past the star's capacity.
How far past?
Well, to perfectly simulate just plain old Newtonian mechanics for a solar system, a conservative estimate would be around 10 to the 75th bit operations per second of simulation time.
Okay, so 10 to the 49th is the max output, and 10 to the 75th is the requirement.
And that's a low estimate. If you account for all the operations for comparison and arithmetic, a more accurate but still severe underestimate is probably closer to 10 to the 120th operations per time step.
That's not just a shortfall. That's an impossible difference in scale.
It's a difference of 26 to 71 orders of magnitude. To put that in perspective, if the sun's total energy capacity is like the annual budget of a small city, the requirement for a perfect simulation is the cumulative budget of the entire global economy for the next 100 million years.
So even a Matryoshka brain can't violate fundamental physics.
No, the computer using our sun wouldn't even be able to get through a single time step of the simulation before the star itself had aged significantly in the real world.
And if you try to simulate something more complicated like quantum mechanics,
the problem just explodes. If you're trying to do grand unified theory level calculations, you'd need something like 10 to the 54th cells per cubic meter. Simulating even 1 cubic meter of space would push the computer past its limits before it could even calculate the next femtosecond of time. The dream of perfect simulation? It's functionally impossible under current physics.
And finally, even if you solved all of that locally, the speed of light problem just kills the galactic colonization goal.
Right. Interstellar distances are just too vast. A von Neumann probe, even traveling at a fraction of light speed, is going to take millions of years to get to the next star system.
Which leads to what's called induced isolationism.
Yeah, the original civilization, lost in its own perfect simulation, just loses interest in the outside universe. Their simulated world is more real, more engaging, but even more practically, it leads to technological obsolescence.
The starter kit you send out is hopelessly obsolete by the time it gets there.
Exactly. New, better computers would have been invented millions of times over in the interim. The very technological acceleration they rely on ends up undermining their own strategy for colonization.
Okay, so accelerationism hits this ultimate theoretical wall in space, the cold, hard laws of physics. But here's where this deep dive takes a radical turn back to Earth, to the immediate future. Because that goal of unbounded power, it's becoming plausible on a terrestrial scale.
It is, and it's because of the imminent, unstoppable disruption of the global energy sector by 3 technologies: solar, wind, and batteries, SWB.
This is the practical core of their argument, isn't it? And it's based entirely on deflationary exponential data.
Yes, we are living through the fastest, deepest, most profound disruption of energy in over a century. And for an accelerationist, this means their philosophical imperative to expand is suddenly becoming financially feasible.
Let's get into the data, because this is where it stops being a prediction and becomes an economic reality. What are the cost curves telling us?
They're telling us that energy is about to behave like information. The cost trajectories are steep, consistent, and predictable. They look a lot like the disruption we saw in computer processing and memory.
So what are the numbers?
Over the last decade in the U.S., solar PV capital costs have dropped by an average of 16.1% every single year. Onshore wind costs fell at 6.2% annually. But the real star is lithium-ion batteries.
What's their decline rate?
An average of 19.7% per year.
Wow. And why is deflation in infrastructure so much more revolutionary than, say, cheaper TVs?
Because the cost of energy is a multiplier for the entire global economy. When the cost of computation dropped Moore's law, it created the entire digital economy. When the cost of clean energy drops exponentially, it fundamentally changes the rules for every other industry. Manufacturing, transport, heavy industry, computation.
A cost that halves every 3 or 4 years.
It's a rate that fossil fuels or nuclear power just cannot compete with. Their cost declines are linear, at best.
And these trends mean that by 2030, SWD isn't just the clean option, it's the cheapest option, full stop.
Precisely. By 2030, getting 100% of your electricity from SWB will be physically possible and economically affordable across the entire continental U.S. and most other populated parts of the world. And the investment implication of that is stark.
No new investment in coal, gas, or nuclear is financially viable, starting now.
And existing plants will quickly become stranded assets. They just won't be able to compete with the near-zero marginal cost of SWB generation.
A lot of conventional analysis seems to miss this, though. They get stuck on the idea that you need these enormous, expensive batteries to cover cloudy days.
Yes, that's a failure of linear thinking. They don't understand the nonlinear relationship that's captured by what's called the clean energy U-curve. The U-curve shows this fundamental trade-off. To get to 100% renewables, you either need massive multi-day battery storage, or you need massive overcapacity in generation.
You have to build enough capacity to reliably cover the absolute worst-case scenario. That German word, Dunkelflaut, the dark, windless winter weeks.
Correct. You have to build way more solar and wind than you need on an average sunny day. But here's the key finding. That approach, focusing on generation overcapacity, it paradoxically minimizes the need for impossibly large batteries.
Can you give us a concrete example?
Let's take California. The lowest cost 100% SWB system there requires about 3.8 to 4.9 times the current generation capacity just to handle those worst case moments.
That sounds like a lot.
It is, but because you have so much generation, the battery storage you need is surprisingly modest, only about 37 hours of average demand. And that system, that overbuild design, is vastly cheaper than trying to build a system with just enough generation for an average day, which would then need batteries to cover weeks of bad weather.
And the inevitable side effect of designing a system for the worst-case scarcity is that most of the time you are living in a state of incredible abundance.
Which is what the sources call clean energy superpower.
Superpower.
It's the massive, unavoidable surplus of energy that's produced at near-zero marginal cost for most of the year, after all the normal electricity demand has already been met. This is going to transform our energy system in the same way the internet transformed information. What happened to bits is about to happen to electrons.
And the scale of this superpower, it just shatters the whole idea of energy scarcity.
It's completely disruptive. A 100% SWB system will produce a shocking amount of this surplus energy on most days. Back to California. The lowest cost system would generate 309 terawatt hours of superpower a year.
How much is that in context?
It's more than the state's total existing annual electricity demand, which is 285 terawatt hours. And that surplus is available on over 93% of all days.
And Texas, with all its sun and wind, is even more extreme.
Texas produces 504 terawatt hours of superpower. That's 122% of its total existing demand. Again, available 93% of the time. We are talking about a transition from energy scarcity to a state of permanent energy overflow.
And this surplus energy costs almost nothing to produce because the capital has already been invested to meet that peak demand.
Exactly. Now, here's the economic leverage part. Superpower offers these disproportionate returns on investment. A small additional capital spend gives you a massive, nonlinear increase in usable surplus energy.
How does that work?
It's because the bottom of that clean energy U-curve is relatively shallow. So small, incremental investments give you huge, nonlinear gains. In California, for example, a modest 20% incremental investment, about $24 billion extra dollars, it nearly doubles the superpower output, from 309 TWh to 592.
And that economic potential is what creates this powerful self-sustaining system, the autocatalytic feedback loop.
Absolutely. The superpower provides cheap energy that can displace fossil fuels everywhere else: transport, industrial heat, steel, and critically heavy computation. But the real feedback loop is when you dedicate that near zero-cost energy to manufacturing more solar panels and more batteries.
More energy makes cheaper solar, which makes more energy.
And on and on.
And a cycle like that becomes a magnet for massive energy consumers. It will fundamentally shift global economic geography.
The numbers on that are just wild.
They are. In Texas, a mere 10% incremental investment, $21 billion, generates 310 terawatt hours of additional superpower. That's enough to attract every major data center in the world, which use about 200 TWh.
And power all the Bitcoin miners on the planet, about 69 TWh.
And you'd still have a significant surplus left over. This is the transition. Energy is going from an extractive, scarce resource to an abundant, almost costless commodity.
And the cost benefits are felt by everyone in the system. Yes. When a high percentage of that superpower gets used by data centers, by industry, the average electricity cost for everyone just plummets. In Texas, using 100% of the superpower drops the average cost from 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour down to just 1.6 cents.
The multiplier effects from that would reshape dozens of industries. It's the engine for unprecedented economic prosperity.
And this is the material economic foundation upon which the eBatak movement builds its real-world claims.
So this massive economic reality of near-zero marginal cost energy, it brings us right back to the beginning, to the philosophy.
It brings us full circle. When energy has a near-zero marginal cost and near-zero negative externalities, it's clean, it's cheap. The old imperative of conservation, the ethic of your colleague on the ridge, it just becomes obsolete.
The ethical mat has to shift completely.
In a world where energy is basically costless and clean, the reflexive belief that we have to minimize its use is seen as economically irrational. And philosophically, it's just obstructive. The new view is that it's wasteful not to utilize this clean energy to maximize value in computation.
It's like the shift with information. Before digital cameras, you had to conserve. You rationed your photos to save expensive film.
Right. But once storage and computation became basically free, the idea of rationing photos became absurd. It was wasteful not to take pictures.
And that analogy just perfectly captures the new energy ethic.
The accelerationists argue that applying an ethic that was developed during an age of scarcity fossil fuels to an era of abundance SWB superpower is just illogical. The new imperative is maximum use, and that forms the political basis for their stance.
Which is deregulation, to turbocharge this disruption and get to the singularity as fast as possible.
We saw this manifest very recently with politicians like Vice President J.D. Vance calling for AI acceleration through deregulation, positioning it as America's necessary strategy to win the global tech race.
A view that prioritizes raw speed and market freedom above all else. But the critics immediately sound the alarm, don't they?
They do. They argue this path risks destabilizing global security, our economic systems. They point to historical failures like the 2008 financial crisis, which was fueled by weak oversight, but they say this would be amplified exponentially by the power of AI.
And what are the specific non-hypothetical risks they're worried about? It's not the matryoshka brains of the future, it's the problems of today.
The immediate risks are severe and they're measurable. They include things like autonomous AI weapon systems destabilizing global security, mass job displacement that deepens inequality faster than any social safety net can possibly respond,
and AI-driven cyber attacks.
attacks that could cripple critical infrastructure on a mass scale. And then there's the rise of monopolistic control by these unregulated tech giants, crushing innovation and concentrating power. And of course, AI-generated deepfakes and misinformation posing an existential threat to democracy itself.
This whole regulatory debate is really highlighting a stark contrast in global approaches to this technology.
It is. While the U.S. has often taken a deregulatory market-first path, other global powers are being much more measured. The European Union's AI Act is a pioneering attempt to mitigate these risks and ensure transparency and accountability.
And it's not just the EU.
No, over 60 nations, including major world powers, have endorsed international pledges to ensure AI is developed responsibly and ethically. It signals a global desire for some guardrails.
So the core counterargument is that regulation doesn't actually stifle innovation. It builds trust, increases a sustainable, accountable framework for long-term growth.
That's the crucial point. Critics argue that the whole progress rhetoric is just a convenient cover story, a way to justify a lack of accountability and to concentrate excessive power into the hands of a few tech oligarchs,
creating a dangerous form of techno-feudalism, where this self-proclaimed hyper-rational elite gets to shape our collective future without any democratic consent.
All while riding that wave of near-zero marginal cost energy that we just discussed.
So this deep dive has taken us on quite a journey. From a philosophical war against universal decay, the ambition to colonize the cosmos with computers, all the way down to the concrete data behind near-zero marginal cost energy right here on Earth.
And that technological disruption, the rise of superpower through solar, wind, and batteries, that part seems inevitable, regardless of what politicians or philosophers think. We are definitively moving out of an extractive energy regime where scarcity drove the ethic of conservation.
And into an information economics energy regime defined by pure abundance.
And the accelerationist philosophy, no matter how controversial its ethical calculus is, it provides the imperative for how to use that abundance. Their belief system defines value impersonally, and it challenges us to think on a cosmic scale. It posits that the only human purpose that really matters is to maximize computational power and push back against the cold, slow advance of entropy, at all costs.
It's a remarkable synthesis, really. The philosophical belief that the only crime against physics is stagnation. It finds its perfect real-world engine in the emerging reality of near-zero, marginal cost, clean electrical energy.
Urging us to use every potential joule for computation, for intelligence, for cosmic expansion. The data supports the conclusion that our opportunity to harness this abundance is immediate and it's unprecedented.
So, to end on that final thought, every unused joule of potential superpower generated by this abundant new system is not a resource conserved, but a measure of potential consciousness, computation, and cosmic value unnecessarily lost to the inevitable cold advance of universal entropy.